can only be attributable to human error.
You're entering Paranormal.
He meddled in things that you people. He meddled in things. He meddled in things.
Where will we go next? This phantom from another time.
No one, Mr. Muller.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
That is one big pile of shit.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alex Daikaiju.
I'm Jasmine with
I'm Eli Watson.
And we are...
Cryptid
Campfire.
Yes. It's good to be back, baby. Even though it's only been like a week for the listeners out there.
Yeah, I know.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cryptid Campfire. We're just a couple episodes into our Cryptid Coliseum tome, and already the limbs and the organs have been flying in an unscripted tornado of carnage. We've seen the skunk ape startle and scare in the Coliseum. We even had the owl man screech and careen in the skies above and rain death below. So please join us today as we embark on something more strange, more prehistoric even, as we settle in and dig out the CADBOROSAURUS.
Let's go. Okay, so
Yes.
for those who don't know, essentially what's happened over these past few weeks is Eli has been in Florida on a lovely skunk ape journey. So it's
I
been a
wouldn't
while.
say lovely.
It's been a while since we've actually recorded, but the whole time he was gone, I was researching for this episode. So I feel like I'm either A, an expert, or B, very burnt out. It could be a combination of both, but I'm so ready to get into this. So I'm just going to jump right in to where we are in the world for this creature. Feel free to stop me if I get ahead of myself, guys. Jump in when you want to. We're going to start off talking about the location. So where is the CADBOROSAURUS located? Well, I'm glad you asked.
In
Yeah,
the
where?
laboratory.
What?
The CADBOROSAURUS is in your laboratory.
Okay.
It's in England.
What?
Because CADBOROSAURUS, the name itself is from Cadbury eggs.
Oh God.
Oh goodness! All right.
Got
I was
that
worried.
cream filling.
All right. So CADBOROSAURUS is located along the shores of the Pacific coast of North America. So from San Francisco, California to Port Townsend, Washington to Yucatan, Alaska, we're in the water. There's a sea creature. Okay. Does that make sense? Why are you looking at me like that? Have I already messed up?
No, I question it.
Question what?
Everything.
Drama already? Conspiracy this early in the episode?
I don't know. It's
This
like
is geography, man.
it's a monster in the water. It's like, and with such a big, range, it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's true.
Is it the same thing?
It does have a big range when it comes to like locations that it's sighted, but most of the sightings do occur in one location, which is where it gets its name, which is Cadboro Bay in Victoria, British Columbia. So obviously it's kind of self-explanatory. CADBOROSAURUS, Cadboro Bay, whatever. Anybody could come up with that. But the person who is sort of the one that has the credit for that name is journalist Archie H. Wills. So in 1933, he was at the Victoria Daily Times and adopted the name CADBOROSAURUS for this creature. But apparently the name was actually first suggested in a letter written to the Victoria Daily Times by a person named I. Vaston in 1933. So around that time, there was talks of this creature in the water. And so it was a big hullabaloo. And so people were like, oh, we should call it this, we should call it that. And supposedly there was an ongoing rivalry with another newspaper. So you've got Archie Wills at the Victoria Daily Times, but then you've also got the Daily Colonist, who was apparently trying to give the sea creature a different name.
As
Amy?
a colonist does. Amy. That's a lame name.
I don't have any additional details regarding that beef, but if somebody else listening does and can tell me why they wanted to name the creature Amy, I'm all ears.
Because we aim to please. let me take this opportunity to thank y'all for watching Cryptid Campfire and ask that if you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now. Like this video and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video goes up. And now, back to the show.
Amy is lamey, dude.
That's what the rival newspaper ran in their newspaper.
Yeah.
Amy is lamey. So, okay. I got that it is 16 to 49 feet in length.
Mhm.
Really?
Yeah, it's a big
Did-
range.
did-
Size varies. Larger, upwards of 20 feet usually. One of the big deals about this specific sea creature, aside from what you mentioned earlier, Eli, about it being spotted in such a strange, wide range of places, it's described a little bit different all the time too.
Let me clarify, because that is not strange. Whales migrate quite a large distance. In fact,
Mhm.
probably a larger distance than that. Sharks do the same. So it's not completely unheard of. I just think it's like with an animal that is unknown
Yeah.
and it always submerged. Like, I don't know. It's dubious.
Yeah.
For an animal this goofy looking.
Hmm. Yeah. So
And what does it look like?
I wish someone would give us a straight answer about that, my friends. What are some of the
What?
things that you guys got?
Here's what I found.
Hmm.
It's described as having a long neck and a head like a horse, with a pair of small elevating front flippers, apparently, and either a pair of hind flippers or a pair of like big, large web hind flippers fused into a big tail that helps it propel powerful propulsion forward.
Hmm. Yeah.
So like a snaky water horse.
Hmm. So what kind of head did you say it had? Sorry.
Like a horse head.
Like a horse head. Yeah. People also say camel. People also say dog.
Giraffe. Giraffe.
Really? Hey.
Perhaps. Perhaps.
That's catty
with,
right there.
Oh.
with a long, sinuous body, serrated ridges down its back. But then some people say it has a smooth back, sometimes said to be furry or hairy or scaly or wrinkled. Some witnesses say it has a mane.
Some
Yeah.
say it can fly.
Really?
That's
No,
actually
not
one
true.
thing it can do. So and it's been reported as a bunch of different colors too. I have green, brown, and several other colors as well.
Green, brown. Yep. And then apparently it can swim up to speeds at 40 knots,
Oh, I
which
actually
is
didn't get that.
46 miles an hour.
Hmm.
That's pretty fast.
Hey, it's
Yeah.
faster than I can swim.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Just a little bit though. I can swim to like 45. So
On a slow day, you know.
Oh my goodness.
After eating a big bowl of pasta.
So the British Columbia Scientific Cryptozoology Club acknowledges that the sightings have produced very different reports, with some describing reptilian or amphibian beasts, while other have seemed more mammalian.
Now-
I do have a quote here from John Kirk, who's the co-founder and treasurer of the BCSCC. In 2019, he said, "CADBOROSAURUS is a generic title that applies to all of them. But in recent years, we've felt the mammal type is what we're going to call CADBOROSAURUS because it by far matches the description of the majority of witnesses."
okay, pause because
Yes.
wow, there's a lot to digest there. But
Alright.
and we will get there.
Why are you
But-
waving a lighter around?
He's been to
I'm-
Florida, Jasmine. It changes a man.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm a different human being. The Eli Watson you knew and loved died there somewhere.
Oh God.
Probably.
And it's and took his place like a finery, like a fiery phoenix. It's the Smeli Watson.
Oh God.
Shmeli. Is this a good time to introduce one of the main characters?
Yes.
Because speaking of the British Columbia Cryptozoology Club,
Yep.
The president, at least for a time, I'm not sure what years, but as of 1989, was Paul the Blonde.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the Cadborosaurus had two main champions vouching for its existence, and that was Dr. Edward L. Boosfield, who was a qualified zoologist specializing on amphipod crustaceans, and Dr. Paul H. LeBlanc, an oceanographer with special interests in oceanic waves, fisheries, and coastal oceanography.
Whoa. Life of the party, both of them.
Unfortunately, both Ed Boosfield and Paul LeBlanc have passed away in recent years, but they were both
Didn't even know
highly.
they were sick.
What was that?
I didn't even know they were sick.
But they were both highly involved in the study and publishing of caddy materials, so their names will come up quite a bit today. And I don't know if we mentioned, kind of just throw it in there, caddy is obviously a nickname for Cadborosaurus.
Oh, I thought that was the third main character.
No.
Caddy O'Houlihan.
It sounds like John Kirk is our third main character. And then the fourth one is our good friend Darren Naish.
Yeah,
But
Darren Naish comes up a little bit later. We're gonna have to get him on the podcast.
Got a lot of main characters in this play to keep track of.
Oh, face drop.
Listen. For anyone, you should go listen to an episode of Cliff and Bobo's podcast, Bigfoot and Beyond, because they had Darren Naish on, and that went exceedingly well.
Are you being sarcastic?
Go listen to it.
Okay.
It is not a civil discourse.
Oh Lord.
And a fun time was had by all.
Yeah.
But it is an important point of view in what we're going to be talking about later. But we're jumping ahead. We did want to say those main names though, Boosfield and LeBlanc, because they are pretty significant when it comes to the materials that are available on the Cadborosaurus. So as we dive into this, one of the first things that we start with in any of our podcast episodes is kind of talking about where the legend of a certain creature comes from. And indigenous artwork has often been known to feature serpent-like sea creatures in petroglyphs, dances, songs, masks, and carvings. The Inuit, who are an indigenous people who inhabited the northern Pacific coast, they painted what some people interpret to be the Cadborosaurus on their canoes in an effort to ward off the creature. In their book, Cadborosaurus, Survivor from the Deep, Dr. Paul LeBlanc and Dr. Edward Boosfield point out that there are multiple petroglyphs from Native Americans found around the Salish Sea. One is located on the Nanaimo River in British Columbia and depicts a long creature with a dragon-like head, very similar to appearance of descriptions of caddy.
So yes, I don't know how to pronounce any of these words.
Yeah, they're rough. If they're the words that I sent you in that message, they're rough. Are they the words I sent you in the message?
I think you only sent one, but I came across two more.
Okay, go ahead.
So I will actually just put the word on the screen.
Oh wait, and for those of you who aren't watching and are only listening, good luck, I guess.
Yeah, just picture the letters in your head.
Okay, fine, I'll embarrass myself. Okay. It's again, this is from the Manhusat people who live on Sydney Inlet. The word is Hiyit Leek. Then we also have Sechelt mythology, which refers to Tachanko. Mm-hmm. And then we have, I don't even know what I wrote. Comics Band. Mm-hmm. By the Comics Band. We have Nukes. I don't know what I wrote there. That's so sloppy. Wow. All right. Anyways, there's something I should point out. The first word, Hiyit Leek. So all of these come from LeBlanc and Boosfield's paper from 1995, which I think Jasmine just named off, the Cadborosaurus Survivor from the Deep. And I could not find a copy of that online. So again, this is when our deadlines become, difficult to work with. Otherwise, I would have purchased it and read it prior to the episode. But so the only references I could find to it online were actually from a very long Darren Naish article in response to it. And I just want to address something very, very quickly. I will be addressing a lot of things very, very quickly throughout today's podcast. But according to Darren Naish, which apparently this comes from LeBlond and Boosfield's work, the name Heat Leak means he who moves side to side. And Naish says that it couldn't be describing Caddy because apparently Caddy moves in a typical sea serpent fashion, right? Which is a vertical undulation. However, I think in my personal, maybe uneducated opinion, think that is a far too literal translation of the word on Darren Naish's part, because, then if you're saying he who moves side to side, in terms of like actual body movement, that could describe almost any fish on the planet,
or even the mighty crab,
or the mighty crab. But there have been caddy sightings of it moving, not like swimming back and forth like so. There have been sightings of that, and so I'm thinking maybe that's what they meant. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah. Well, what was interesting for me was I could not find any video or audio pronunciations of either of those words. Of those words, actually, which is frustrating for me because I try to pronounce them as accurately as I can. And it was so interesting whenever I was Googling the word, which I've been pronouncing in my head as Hayatilk, that, which is probably still wrong. Anytime I tried to Google that word or look that word up on the internet would be like, did you mean Hitler? And I'd be like, no.
It's not even close.
No.
It's not even.
Listen, Google, I just don't think he was a good man. I don't agree with his politics.
Yeah, I don't know why it was so hard to find anything further on those words. Like you said, the main source used when referencing those words is LeBlond and Boosfield's books. But anyway, if we want to move on to some sightings, I'm ready.
Whoa.
Okay, so in the year 73 AD, I'm joking.
Oh my God. Okay. I was like, hold up. No. But there have apparently been more than 300 eyewitness accounts that have taken place in the last 200 years.
Yep, that's what they say.
Yep, that's what they say.
Would-
European.
Would that make it one of the most like reported cryptids sighted wise, or because that's pretty good amount of sightings, I would say.
Yeah.
But then again, I don't know what to go off of other than Bigfoot sightings, which are like 10 a week sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Nessie definitely has more. I would even think Champ has more, and probably even Ogopogo has more, considering how much video footage there is of Ogopogo. So I don't know. It's up there for sure.
Yeah, it's a healthy outing for CADBOROSAURUS.
Yeah, it's definitely not like a one-time thing that like was in the news for a week and then went away. This was something that was pretty consistent. European colonists of coastal British Columbia, Canada, and Washington claimed from the 1880s onwards to witness a large sea monster in the region's coastal waters. From LeBlond and Boosfield's book, CADBOROSAURUS, Survivor from the Deep, there's an observation reported from 1897. I didn't get a name. Because again, this was a secondhand source. This was something I was reading online that said this is what the book said. But the quote is, "I saw ahead of us what I thought was a piece of driftwood. On getting closer, I noticed it was moving towards us. What we could see was an object sticking out of the water about 2 feet. When within a few feet of it, the end uncoiled and raised a long neck about 5 feet out of the water with a head like a snake's on it."
Whoa.
So that was one of the earliest sightings that I came across.
Did they say it had a snake head or just a head like the way its neck was?
I'm not sure. I feel like it could be interpreted either way. A long neck about 5 feet out of the water with a head like a snake's on it. So it sounds like a snake head.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because did you mention that in the intro? Because you said like it looks like a horse, a camel.
Usually it's horse, camel, or dog.
Yeah. So snake is a new one. That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Snaky boy.
1932, highly respected wildlife writer and novelist Hubert Evans comes into the picture because he was instantly believed when he reported to Howard White that he had seen a sea serpent. So in an article in Rain Coast Chronicles, White recounts Evans' story. One day, Evans and another man were working on a road, and a neighbor came running up, urging them to come over and see something. And they had been looking out at the water at a strange creature they saw through a telescope. And it was a calm day on the water. And through this telescope, they could see a series of bumps. And at first, Evans was like, "It's sea lions, guys. They run in a line like that. Just, it's just sea lions." But the neighbor was like, "Just keep watching." And so
Oh,
at the end of the bumps, a shaft 6 or 8 feet high shot straight up into the air. And comparing it with a spar buoy out of the water, they estimated it as 12 inches wide. And even then, Evans was like, it could just be a log, popping up. But then the log started to elongate horizontally, and they could see a head resembling a horse's. And then apparently the head turned and seemed to look straight at them. And so Evans said, it just put the hair up on the back of your neck.
I was hoping he was going to say, guys, that's just the water warping that log into looking like it's turning its head.
So important to note at this point that we're gonna, let me say one more thing and then I'll get into what I was gonna say. So the CADBOROSAURUS received widespread attention in the 1930s after a clerk of the British Columbia legislature told the Victoria Daily Times that he and his wife had seen something obscure in the water while out sailing in October of 1933. So we've got Major H.W. Langley. Does this name sound familiar to you guys?
Yep. It reminds me of a kid I knew in high school.
Oh, okay. He was on his yacht with his wife when they heard a snort and a hiss and saw a large creature with a dome-like back with serrations. Langley had been whaling and said that it was unlike any whale he'd ever seen. He described the creature they saw near the front of their boat as being a greenish-brown color. And when this encounter was published, it inspired another eyewitness to come forward. What did you want to add, Eli?
Okay. One thing. I don't think you mentioned where this took place. And so I was curious about it. So I looked it up. And so he was sailing on the Harrow Strait and observed it off Chatham Island. I think maybe you said that. I actually sent a little map to the Facebook chat of where that was and in relation to Cadboro Bay, which and it's right there. It's just outside where my pin drop is Chatham Island, and that whole body of water is Harrow Strait. It's pretty big, and then Cadboro Bay is visible. I'll probably put it in the episode in the video. Just it's kind of cool. I just wanted to know.
Hey, man, we always appreciate a good map here at Cryptid Campfire.
That's also the same place in which the next. I don't think it happened next, but it was where the other sighting happened. So like this story came out, and then somebody else came forward and said that something similar happened to them, and that was F.W. Kemp, who was an official at the British Columbia Archives. According to him, while he and his family were sitting on the shore of Chatham Island beach in British Columbia, they saw an extravagantly long serpent glide across the water. I like their story because the quote I have is very short, but it has some interesting words. It says, "The reptilian creature swam towards shore where it raised its head out of the water and rested it on a rock. It had a serrated tail and Kemp said moved a bit like a crocodile, and it had a mane that resembled a bed of kelp, and he calculated that it was more than 60 feet long. Other sources say Kemp estimated it stretched more than 80 feet long. Either way, it's super big."
Big sea serpent with some luscious locks, apparently, too.
Yeah. They weren't the only ones to come forward after that story was published, though.
I'm sure.
I think I got from a paper, from an article written in Pursuit newsletter Pursuit newsletter was Ivan Sanderson's newsletter that he published, I think, monthly
Okay.
for a couple of decades. And
That's cool.
yeah, and there was like guest writers and stuff in it. And so I have like 64 issues of it in PDF searchable. So I like just
Whoa.
typed in CADBOROSAURUS and like as a bulk to see what came up, and it's mentioned in 4 issues.
Oh,
And
wow.
one of them is an analysis of like what happens when people come forward publicly with a story, and
Mhm.
like the typical pattern of sightings previously unreported, people will suddenly come forward. And
Mhm.
so he, I think, said 100 people came forward after the original
Wow.
person, after the major story was published. 100 people
That's
came forward.
crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Let me find the name of it real quick. I have it written. It's called Sea Serpent Reporting Dynamics, written by Ron Western. Ron Westrom. Why did I write so sloppy? Okay,
I don't know,
anyways.
man. That's an answer. That's a question only you can answer. What I was gonna say earlier, but I waited to, was that Cadborosaurus was making it big around the same exact time that the Loch Ness monster had hit the news. If you're familiar, you may have already been making that connection in your mind when you were hearing those dates that we were talking about just a minute ago.
Yep.
In their 1995 book on Caddy, LeBlanc, and Boosfield mentioned a lot of the 1933 Loch Ness monster stories before discussing the Cadborosaurus accounts, which had made front page news in British Columbia just a few months later. Darren Naish, who we've mentioned in many podcast episodes before, makes the connection that popular interest in the Loch Ness monster drove journalists on the west coast of North America and elsewhere to possibly embellish their own reports of a similar water monster, which is not a crazy claim. That's a very valid statement that he has made.
It's not.
In fact,
mhm.
Go ahead. Did you have something else to say?
Oh, I was just gonna say, if you guys want to recap on the wild year of 1933 when it comes to Nessie, check out the second episode of our Nessie trilogy.
Mhm. Yeah, we would be remiss if we didn't mention we had a 3-part on Nessie.
Yeah, and the second one is almost exclusively 1933.
It is. It really
it's 33 and 34. So
but kind of talking about the possible embellishment of news articles and making things more exciting than they actually are. There's an unpublished 1985 manuscript that's kept at Greater Victoria Public Library, where Wills, the guy who officially named Cadborosaurus in the newspaper, he wrote how the grim news of the time, which, the Depression, Hitler's rise to power, which is interesting because the internet was asking me if I meant Hitler when I was searching that other word.
Whoa, the connections. This is crazy.
He did try to capture a Yeti back in the day.
Maybe he was out for the Cadborosaurus too. Anyway,
wow.
All of that grim news encouraged Wills to try and inject a bit of humor in the newspaper. So he had been seeing that the rumors were swirling that there was a sea serpent in the bay and all of this, and he felt like, why not have a little fun? So his writings on Caddy were linked then with the current of the time fame with Nessie. And I've got another story from 1933, and I'm sure there's many. This is one of those episodes where we're just kind of throwing out random sightings that we enjoyed. This is one that I thought was pretty interesting. I don't know if you guys read about Cyril Andrews and Norman Georgeson.
No.
Okay. So they were hunting ducks just north of the San Juan Islands.
Oh, I didn't get their names, but I got a little bit of the story, but you probably have way more.
They were hunting ducks on the Canadian side of the border when they shot a goldeneye, but it wasn't enough to kill it. So the duck, fell into the water and swam into a bed of kelp. And the hunters were pursuing the duck when they saw the head of the sea monster rise nearby before disappearing beneath the water. So as one hunter got closer to the wounded duck, the sea monster's head kept reappearing closer and closer to the duck. So it's like, as he was getting closer to the duck, the monster would be closer to the duck and pop its head up, and then it would get closer and closer. And they were like both getting closer to the duck. And he says the sea monster's head kept reappearing closer and closer to the duck A head he described as similar to that of a horse, but without ears or nostrils. And at one point, both hunters witnessed the head and one coil of the sea monster's body rise out of the water before it sank back down. And one of the quotes from one of the hunters, I don't know which one, says, I was still only 10 feet away from it with the duck right beside the thing, when to my horror, it gulped the bird down its throat. It then looked at me, its mouth wide open, and I could plainly see its teeth and tongue, which were like those of a fish. When it closed its mouth, all the loose skin folded neatly at the corners, while its breathing came in short, sharp pants like a dog after a run.
Sounds
would've
kind of
shot it.
horrifying.
And so then after grabbing the duck, Caddy just
Yep.
snapped at them and then went underwater. Crazy, right? I think it's crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Mhm.
It is crazy.
Confirmed diet for Caddy too.
Yeah, I mean, there's other reports of the CADBOROSAURUS having beef with birds. In one case, a witness watched a strange animal battle with ducks. So there was another duck incident. And then there was apparently, I couldn't find this art that apparently exists, but there was an artist who reproduced a series of illustrations of his observation of the CADBOROSAURUS trying to snatch birds out of the air.
Wild.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Hey man, if you got a long neck, you gotta use it, I guess.
Yeah. So after the 1940s, sightings kind of drop off. There was a record low in the 70s, but then numbers started climbing again in the 80s and 90s. Was there anything in that time period that you guys came across that you wanted to share?
I have a report from 1997.
Let's hear
Take
it.
it away.
Okay, so this comes from the Mock family, and I wish I had more time because this was really interesting to me, and I wish I would have found more details, but I'm going to tell you what I know. So this occurred July 1997. I don't have a specific date, and this was 2 sightings by the
When my
same
brother
family.
was born,
Whoa.
I think. Oh God, I'm gonna be in trouble if that's wrong.
Oh,
Sorry, continue.
So this is actually 2 sightings from the same family. So, and I think they both happened in July 1997, but both were definitely in 1997. So the 3 characters involved are Timothy, Laurice, and Christopher Mock. And so in the first instance, they were traveling to Princess Louisa Inlet, which is in British Columbia, in a 24-foot long boat. The sea was glassy calm. Tim was at the wheel and he saw what he thought was a log, so he changed course to avoid said log. But then the log broke into 3 pieces and disappeared below the wave. Well, actually, there were no waves, but it broke, it disappeared underwater. And so they think that was like the humps of Caddy.
Mm-hmm.
Then later, near Humphrey Channel, near Desolation Sound, that all sounds made up, but it makes sense. Again, the sea was really calm, and the family noticed a wake moving back and forth in the water, moving parallel to the shore, not toward it. And so Laurice used binoculars to look at it and described it as it looked like someone doing the breaststroke like a snake. And so this is where I got my thing with the whole Darren Naish thing about he who moves side to side, because it's moving side to side parallel to the coastline. You know, it was moving back and forth, which funny enough, there's a footage of Ogopogo doing something very similar. If you guys remember, it was like 20 people witnessed it and one person filmed it. And so yeah, that's why I think Darren Naish is wrong.
Okay.
But moving on. We're moving on.
Yeah. So a little bit of a time jump. The next thing that I wanted to talk about happened in 2009 when there was an Alaskan fisherman named Kelly Nash, not Naish. We'll be talking about both of those people. Kelly Nash caught what he claimed to be footage of multiple CADBOROSAURUS in the water. And I don't know what the plural for CADBOROSAURUS is. Is it CADBOROSAURUses or is it CADBOROSAURI? CADBOROSAURUS. Anyways,
Just call them caddies.
Yeah,
caddies.
caddies.
So it was really hard for me at first to figure out exactly what the story was with this footage, because he apparently filmed for several minutes, but then only short segments of the video were ever made public over the years. The most concise explanation of the events that I found comes from A Menagerie of Mysterious Beasts, Encounters with Cryptid Creatures by Ken Gerard from 2016.
Whoa. That's Ken Gerhard.
Gerhard, sorry.
No worries. I
Are
met
you a
him.
personal friend?
Not yet, but I have met him. I have met him.
All right.
And, he's a cool guy.
How did you
Well-
pronounce it, Jasmine?
I said Gerard.
Gerard.
Gerard. Hey,
Gerhard.
it's a weird last name. Yes.
Well, next time you talk to him, you can let him know that his book saved my life for this episode, because it was the most concise explanation that I was able to find about what actually went down. So during 2009, local fisherman Kelly Nash, along with his 2 sons, sighted several large marine animals swimming in Nushagak Bay in the far southwest part of the state. So they began to videotape the creatures, which appeared to be swimming in a straight line formation and fleeing a pod of beluga whales. Highly experienced at viewing all manner of sea critters, Kelly and the Nash boys were convinced that they were not observing regular whales, sea lions, or anything else known.
Whoa, Kelly and the Nash Boys. That's a TV show.
Well, we'll talk about TV in just a minute. The things looked to be snake-like, about 20 feet long, and they had serrated backs, and at times the subjects appeared to lift their heads out of the water. So consequently, the footage was reviewed by Paula Blond and John Kirk, who we've both already mentioned in this episode, of the British Columbia Scientific Cryptozoology Club. Blogging on the website Cryptomundo, Kirk said that he was stunned when one of the animals seemed to raise its head out of the water and look directly at the camera, almost very similar to that story we told earlier, displaying a camel-like head and face identical to descriptions of Canada's famous sea serpent, CADBOROSAURUS. And so for Kirk, this was definitive evidence that the video showed massive marine animals of a previously unclassified type. And I found an article written by Kirk on Cryptomundo's website. So I have a direct quote from him here that states, "Dr. Paul LeBlanc and myself are the only 2 people who have seen all of the footage obtained by Kelly, Jason, and Kyle Nash. We have seen the full-on face shot of the head of one of these animals, and it is the living, breathing double of CADBOROSAURUS wilsi." Are you having a moment, Eli?
I am. Wow, that's crazy. Wow, just everything you just said was like, wow.
Well,
They
So-
hit him in a spiritual kind of way.
shortly thereafter, though, Nash sold the rights to the footage to a television production company from Monday. And there was a gap of 2 years where nothing happened with the footage. And it was finally made public as part of a television program titled Alaskan Monster Hunt, Hill Stranded, which featured 2 stars from Deadliest Catch, which is a popular series about the Alaska fishing industry.
You know why it's called Hill Stranded, right?
Because that's their names, the Hillstrand
Yes,
brothers.
the Hill Strand. But I think it's clever.
Yeah, it is. But here's where it gets annoying. Unfortunately, the show
Yes.
only presented a brief, inconclusive segment of the video and did not reveal the evidence that inspired LeBlanc and Kirk to be like, "Oh my God, this is it. This is proof."
Dude, yeah, it's
So-
a horrible clip. It's like 23 seconds long.
Yeah. And so John Kirk inquired about the matter and ran up against a wall because neither the Nash family nor the television network could provide answers to why the program did not include the definitive portion of the film or if it had ever even existed. Further digging by Kirk led him to the disheartening conclusion that, quote, "quite possibly someone had inadvertently lost or taped over the most compelling section of the footage, ensuring that an important piece of evidence would be lost forever." And then he also says the field of cryptozoology, or no, he doesn't say this. This is from Kirk doesn't say this. This is commentary made by Gerhard in his book. He says the field of cryptozoology seems to be cursed by comparable gaffes and near misses.
Yes, I would agree. And see, this is why I aim to change things because if I was in that situation, one, I would either pay for the original copy, two, steal it. So, you know, I'm gonna get it. One way or the other, and I'm gonna make sure it doesn't get lost. So,
That's funny.
you know, don't ask me what I've done already.
Oh dear. So just a couple more notes about this footage and this event. Nash has also unfortunately passed away since all of these events transpired. But before he did, he had also made it clear that these animals were not anything he'd ever seen before. So whales and other commonly seen sea life could be ruled out because he had 40 years of on-the-job knowledge of fishing in the area of British Columbia. And interestingly, Andy Hillstrand had told Discovery News that he might have seen CADBOROSAURUS while filming their program. So referring to one location, he said, we saw a big, long, white thing moving in the water, which doesn't sound like CADBOROSAURUS to me because it's white, but who knows. He says we chased it for about 20 minutes. Spray came out of its head. And it was definitely not a shark. A giant eel may be possible, but eels don't have humps that all move in unison. I've never seen anything like it before. Hillstrand speculates that whales following salmon might be pushing the animals closer to the shores and in the view of humans. While he understands the controversy and skepticism over such sightings and claims, he believes that many fishermen who have reported seeing the animal are, quote, not a bunch of fruitcakes. These are people who are familiar with the local marine life.
Okay. I like how he says, he sees air, it blows air out of its head, and then he goes, it's definitely not a shark, because yes, sharks do that. It's like you would think a dolphin or a whale might be the first thing you would think of when an underwater animal blows air out of its head, but no, let's go with shark and then eel, because what? I don't know what I just heard.
I know, it's crazy.
Wait,
And it gets
who
crazier.
said that?
That comes from Anthony Hillstrand. Andy Hillstrand, who was in the TV show that aired the footage of a terrible, like the worst clip possible.
And he's one of the Deadliest Catch guys, right?
Yeah.
But even more so. Wow, what an enigma.
It's gonna get crazier, guys, because
I don't think I can handle it.
it's time to talk about the Naden Harbor carcass.
Okay, yes, this is okay, everyone, strap in. This is gonna dominate the rest of this episode.
So like Eli said, strap in. We're gonna try and zoom through this. There's so much that could be talked about, but we're gonna really only try and hit the main points. So basically, there's many cases of carcasses being found that were initially thought to be that of a CADBOROSAURUS, dead bodies washing up on the islands and the shores and everything like that. Most of them were determined to be other various species of sharks, whales, and seals and whatnot. But the most significant thing happened in October of 1937. And when I say I'm going to zoom through this, I really am going to zoom through this. So stop me if absolutely necessary. But I am pumped up. Okay, so
wait, let me, before you begin. Okay, so we're gonna blaze through this right now, but I am very captivated by this, that I might try to do an in-depth article on it, maybe.
Okay,
just be aware.
Sounds good. So basically, October 1937, workers are harvesting the blubber of a sperm whale in Naden Harbor, British Columbia, and they found an oddity digesting in the whale's belly. The carcass was noticed as the flensers were opening up the whale's stomach, and they then alerted their supervisor, F.S. Huband. So LeBlanc and Bousfield tracked down an eyewitness much years later. This is just like a little sidebar to what happened when this carcass was discovered. They talked to Jim Wackelin of Victoria, British Columbia, who remembered the event well. He was an assistant to his father, who was the station's blacksmith back in 1937. He recalled that the carcass he recalled that the carcass caused some excitement among the flensers, and that all the station personnel came to gawk at it. So the points made that everyone who regarded it as remarkable was already familiar with creatures like six-gilled sharks, ragfish, and big squid, and they couldn't possibly have been mistaken for anything else that already existed.
Okay, we need to pause right now. because I don't think you brought this up quite yet, because this is 1937. And the reason why we're kind of bringing this up a little bit towards the end is because it was forgotten about. It happened in 1937, and then it was forgotten about for a long time until the 1990s, the early 1990s, when LeBlanc and Boosfield brought it up again, which is why they ended up finding that witness.
Yes.
So, and then also keep in mind that that witness was interviewed in the early 1990s, almost 60 years after the fact. I don't want to like say that it's not true, but like, I don't know. Memory has a funny way of doing things.
It does. So Hubert decided to make a record of the specimen and had it prepared for photography. It was laid out on a work table. Some wooden packing cases were placed adjacent to the table to increase the available surface length, and white sheets were hung behind it to tidy things up a bit. One of the photos, or a copy of it, was passed on to the Victoria Daily Colonist, which was the rival publication to the Victoria Daily Times that we talked about way at the beginning of this episode, where it appeared on the front.
Lamey name.
Yeah, where it appeared on the front cover, October 31st, 1937. The photo is black and white, depicts a long, slender, dark carcass of a vertebrate animal laid out on a table with a series of packing cases. There's what looks like a rectangular head at one end, a crumpled adjoining neck region, a sinuous serpentine body, and a ragged, serrated region with what looks like a ragged tail fin. Mention of the carcass was also made in the whaling station's annual report published in September 1937 in Fisheries New Bulletin. It was noted that the carcass was about 10 feet long, had a head recalling that of a large dog, animal-like vertebrae, and a tail resembling a single blade of gill bone as found in whale jaws. So essentially the same thing I just said with a little extra detail. So what ended up happening was supposedly a section of spine, a piece of tissue identified as baleen, and some skin, all supposedly pertaining to the carcass, were forwarded to either the Pacific Biological Station at Nanaimo or perhaps the Royal British Columbia Museum in Victoria. It might be that specimens were sent to both institutions, but it seems that something arrived in Victoria at least, because in 1937, it was reported that museum director Francis Kermode identified the relevant remains as those of a fetal baleen whale. Nothing else is recorded, so the general feelings that the specimen was lost, discarded, or not retained in the first place. So, specimens were taken, sent to a lab. They're like, it's a whale. Case closed, right? But Jim Wakelin, the witness that Boosfield and LeBlanc talked to, said in 2007 that the carcass was actually coiled up and preserved in salt, sent by boat to Vancouver, and then stored in acetone in a warehouse belonging to the American Whaling Company in Bellevue, Washington. But there's no record. So Kermode's opinion has usually been taken to show that official interest in the carcass was non-existent, and it was apparently responsible for the dismissal of the case by Bernard Heuvelmans. I didn't look into any more detail about what Heuvelmans was saying at the time, but supposedly this person saying it's a whale was enough for him to say, all right, case closed, it's a whale, moving on. But that wasn't enough for LeBlanc and Boosfield. Anything you want to add before we get into the drama?
Bernard Heuvelmans wrote an entire book on sea serpents, so he wasn't closed off to the idea of sea serpents, but he might have been closed off to that particular instance of a carcass.
Right.
So
yes, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. So during their 1992 research, Boosfield and LeBlanc rediscovered Hubert's photo in the Provincial Archives at Victoria. 1992 was also the year which Boosfield and LeBlanc were speaking about CADBOROSAURUS at the American Society of Zoologists annual meeting. So at this point in 1992, Boosfield and LeBlanc were saying that the animal's phylogenetic affinities couldn't be pinned down and that it possessed both reptilian and mammalian characteristics. They also suggested that the British Columbian animal might have links to marine and freshwater cryptids of the Northern Hemisphere, including those of Loch Ness and Lake Okanagan. So they're saying, oh, there's a connection. One of the first mainstream outings of the Naden Harbor carcass was its coverage in a January 1993 New Scientist article by Penny Park. So, like Eli had said earlier, this picture was taken in 1937 when this carcass was found. Nobody really cared about it until the 90s when Boosfield and LeBlanc were like, hey, look at this thing. And then everybody started talking about it again. So January 1995, Boosfield and LeBlanc are aware that more photos must exist because author and fisherman William Hageland had included one photo showing the carcass at a different angle than shown in Hubin's photo in his 1987 book, Whalers No More. Hageland had obtained this photo from the Vancouver Maritime Museum, and an investigation here revealed that it was one of 2 additional photos of the carcass. So we got 3 photos floating around. 1 by Hubin, 2 by Borman. So these photos were included in a photo album compiled by G.V. Borman of Victoria, British Columbia, entitled Whaling in the Queen Charlotte Islands, 1937. A duplicate set were also located in the Provincial Archives in Victoria. Borman was first aid officer at the whaling station. His photos were sharper and showed the carcass more clearly in lateral view than Hubin's did. So of the known 3 photos, the 2 Borman ones were therefore preferred by Boosfield and LeBlanc. Boosfield and LeBlanc noted that no one seems to have paid any attention to these photos or given them any serious interest over the years, but they were effectively unknown to the scientific community prior to Boosfield and LeBlanc's discussion of them. So they were kind of like, hey, you guys, why nobody talking about these things?
And honestly, those photos that Borman took are like really clear compared to Hubin's photo. That it's like, I don't know what Hubin was doing, or he was using a potato even by then their standards.
It goes to show you everyone can hold a camera, but not everyone can use it rightly.
Yeah. Apparently the first aid officer of a whaling company can do it better. So
So during 1995, Boosfield and LeBlanc were including these photos in a formally published technical monograph on CADBOROSAURUS, wherein they would formally name the creature using the photos as critical evidence. It was published as Supplement 1 to Volume 1 of a new journal called Anthopacifica, Journal of Systematic Biology. 2 of the 3 members of the editorial board published objections to the publication of Boosfield and LeBlanc's CADBOROSAURUS paper, specifically stating we are opposed to its publication as a formal species description for several reasons. And they noted their concerns about the usefulness of the photos, the anecdotal nature of the relevant eyewitness descriptions, and the absence of a holotype, meaning where's the body?
Yeah, okay. So that stirred up a lot of stuff. The fact that they published that, again, Pursuit newsletter actually issued its own response to that, a 15-page response about how what they propose in that paper is like scientifically impossible. So, and then Naish even accuses them of what's known as creature building, which he also accuses Bernard Heuvelmans of doing. And so creature building is essentially when you take eyewitness reports, supposed photographs, and anything else, and kind of create the creature and, propose a biology or a physiology of said creature. You might even throw in like behavioral guesses, its diet, where it lives, like if it lives in a nest or it lives underwater or whatever. And I don't know, Naish doesn't make a sort of judgment one way or another, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's like, it is a thing that people do in cryptozoology, like a lot, that I am now, like, because of this, I am now aware of it, like, yes, okay, people do that a lot.
Yeah. So regardless of the objections, the paper did see print, and it's a 25-page study that aims to lay out the case for its existence and scientific validity, names it as a new living reptile species, and goes on to discuss its possible affinities, lifestyles, and biology. And the keystone bit of evidence that they use are these 1937 carcass photos. So the monograph was also a vehicle for the publication of a formal scientific name for the creature. They called it CADBOROSAURUS wilsi, the wilsi honoring Archie Wills, who's the one who named it in the paper. So basically what happens here is the monograph makes it sound like Boosfield and LeBlanc are classifying Caddy as a reptile, even though they keep using the term plesiosaur, which is contradictory, plus the CADBOROSAURUS, which is purportedly serpentine, furry, with a camel-shaped head, ears or horns, and said to move, and vertical undulation is nothing like a plesiosaur.
None of it makes any sense.
I know.
Like, when you're just like, why?
So basically, this is kind of where I'm going to stop with this stuff, because there is a lot of back and forth between a lot of different parties regarding the details, the anatomical data, the validity of basing an entire existence of a creature off of a photo, which actually has happened before. Just a quick sidebar. There have been actual scientific discoveries and species named by photos only, because they didn't kill one to bring it in. Anyway, basically what happens is there's beef, there's drama, and you can read all about those details in Darren Naish's series of articles rehashing everything. There is so much content, guys. There's so many articles that you can read about what's going on here.
And to me, that is, I keep saying this. And let me clarify. I always say my favorite part of cryptozoology is not the cryptids, but the people involved. And when I say that, this is what I mean. I live for the drama.
You live for the drama.
Spill the tea.
In which, like the simple drama of the fact that, people are seeing like essentially a sea serpent, and then the two people who research it are like, well, obviously that means it's a plesiosaur. And then everyone's like, no, you're wrong. And they're like, we don't care.
I mean, Naish literally wrote an article called CADBOROSAURUS Wars, so it gets pretty heated. But we're gonna cut it off there with all of that, and I'm gonna go back to the carcass, because there's also like people who are like, oh well, it could be a shark, like obviously this carcass actually existed, but was it a Cadborosaurus? Maybe not. It could have been a basking shark. It could have been a sturgeon. It could have been an other known species, like a fish of some sort.
Right. Because I think LeBlond and Boosfield proposed like, oh, well, these are like whalers, they would have been able to identify it. But when you look at the pictures, this is the whole thing with globsters, is like, especially things in the ocean, when they die and decompose, especially inside of a whale's stomach, like things become pretty unrecognizable pretty quick.
Yeah.
So they could have been whalers and just had never seen anything decompose that way before, so I don't know. I think Naish brings up a good point when he says they could have misidentified it, and I think it's true. So
yeah. So that's what we had to zoom through, but we got through it, and it was just so intriguing to me. Like it was wild. Moving on though, there are a couple of people who have claimed to have captured baby Cadborosaurus. Alex, I think you had one of those stories, don't you?
Just a little bullet point, I think, because you mentioned, what was it, 1991?
Maybe.
Because what I have is in July of 1991 on John's Island, which is the San Juan Islands.
Yeah.
Grouping. Phyllis Harsh claims to have caught a small 2-foot, 60-centimeter baby caddy, and then she returned it to the water, it says.
Yeah.
Which sounds like a fumble.
Yeah, she used a tree branch to push it back into the sea. And she also stated for the record that she had found what appeared to be a dinosaur skeleton beneath an eagle's nest, also on the San Juan Islands, as well as having seen a full-size caddy specimen in the island passage in 1990. I wish I could have found even more on her, but I didn't. But that
smells
is
fishy.
Fishy.
Get
well,
it?
what's even fishier is that Hageland, who we have already talked about, also claimed to have captured a baby caddy
in 1968.
Yes, near De Courcy Island.
Yeah, and so it was, according to Hageland, it was 16 inches long with scales and had a tail like a flipper and 2 additional flippers on its body. And then he tossed it back before anyone could photograph it or study it.
Dick move.
Well, he did it because he didn't want it to die, according to what I read, because he had been keeping it in a pail and it was thrashing around and it was very agitated. So he knew it probably wouldn't survive. And so he let it go.
That's good.
Yeah.
I thought more like people were coming like, oh my gosh, we got to take a picture. And he's just like, take a picture of that, you nerds.
Well, At least I feel like that's more believable than that champ story. You guys remember that one where the guy found the
my
baby?
memory.
There was a guy who claimed to have found a baby champ and decided to take it home. And he was also a science teacher and claimed he had it in his science class for a couple of months and then
Yeah.
lost it because it got tossed out the
Tossed out the
window.
window.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
that's
remember
right.
that?
Crazy. Ugh. But people doubt his story because he apparently wrote about the encounter like 20 years after it actually happened. So it's the same thing with that witness that LeBlond and Boozfield talked to regarding the Naden Harbor carcass. Like so much time passed from the actual event to the retelling of the event. So who knows?
Right. I think that's the big problem with that carcass is the fact that it happened so long ago. Why are they trying to make it such a big thing? I just don't get it.
Well, I think one of the last things to talk about, which we can also zoom through, is just kind of like explanations for what maybe the Cadborosaurus actually is.
Sure.
Because the idea that the Cadborosaurus, if it's real, might be mammalian rather than plesiosaurian. That's kind of the more mainstream take within the cryptozoological community, which that was a lot of the drama back then about, is it a mammal, is it a reptile, is it a fish, whatever. There's also the idea that it could be a basilosaur, a type of whale that survived from long ago and is present again. That's proposed by good old what's his name, Carl Schuker.
Oh, cool.
There's also the proposal that it's a long-necked sea cow. And
like a manatee.
Yeah.
I did want to bring this up really quick. It's not quite an explanation for anything, but our good friend, Scott Martis, who actually we interviewed on the show during our Summer of Champ series, he had a paper called "What Was the Naden Harbor Carcass?" aka Cadborosaurus wilsey. And it's just a lot of pictures. There's not a whole lot of words. And I don't think there's an actual conclusion drawn in the paper.
Oh, man.
But, I think it's interesting.
And then if you want to get into the boring stuff, some have claimed that caddy sightings are just conger eels, sea lions, other creatures misidentified, standing waves, colliding wakes, lines of swimming, other things, and even birds flying close to the surface have all been said to just be misinterpretations of people seeing what they think is a giant multi-humped water monster. And then if you want to get into the kind of, well, maybe it's real, but maybe there's a lot of overlap. Maybe we don't really know what's going on. At the very, very top of this episode, I read a quote from John Kirk where he was like, yeah, the term Cadborosaurus covers a lot of stuff, but we're going to focus on the mammalian animal. Researchers say that caddy sightings are not necessarily describing one single creature and could possibly be 2 or 3 different ones. Darren Naish has a quote that says, eyewitness accounts used to support the reality of Cadborosaurus likely represent a hodgepodge of seal and deer sightings, as well as sightings of other animals and phenomena. Maybe the Northeast Pacific is home to a large, as of yet unrecognized vertebrate animal, but this is not clear from eyewitness accounts. They represent an inconsistent set of diverse descriptions that cannot be interpreted as evidence for a new species. But Naish also says cryptids are often composite entities constructed by combining observations of different species and or phenomena. Some Cadborosaurus descriptions do refer to vertically undulating serpentine phenomena that, if they do represent animals, are difficult to reconcile with species that we know about. So please note here that I am not necessarily discounting altogether the existence of a marine vertebrae that remains unrecognized by scientists at large.
Yeah,
so,
you're mostly dismissing it.
Yeah, but he's open.
Okay.
He's open to the idea of the Cadborosaurus being real.
Yeah, he's probably like 90% closed off to it. Anyways, I don't need to get into this. This is very emotional.
But that's it, guys. That's that was, let me tell you, getting that out of my brain I've had that in there for about 3 weeks, all of that info that I was just ready to regurgitate out, and now I'm never gonna remember any of it again.
Oh, there's a
See-
whole lot.
That's like, go back and listen to the original Jersey Devil episode, because I did what Jasmine just did on that one, where I blew through everything and no one said anything.
No one said anything. We just sat there and like talked.
Jasmine, I think you said one thing at the very beginning of that podcast and didn't say anything for like half an hour.
That's really funny. Well, thank you guys for letting me take the lead on this one, because it was building. It was building.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking the lead. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And are you ready for the main event?
Listeners, if you feel like Jasmine spoke too fast, play it at half speed.
Yeah.
You can do that.
And turn down the, what is it, like the bass or whatever, so it gets deeper. So it's a deeper voice.
Oh Lord. Yeah.
The CADBOROSAURUS.
Oh, it's my turn,
Yes.
guys, to take
Oh.
us to
So
our
ready.
cryptid battle for today.
Yes, I'm ready.
Take
We
us
are-
away, Jasmine.
We are continuing our Cryptid Coliseum saga, and today we will see who the CADBOROSAURUS is battling in this Coliseum. So, are you ready?
Yes.
Here we go.
Yes.
Dramatic reading. We once again find ourselves within the walls of the legendary Cryptid Coliseum, this time floating atop the waters of Cadboro Bay in Victoria, British Columbia. The spectators watch anxiously as mysterious humps occasionally break the surface of the water. They know that Caddy is awaiting her opponent, but who will it be? The gate starts to rise. Go, Alex. Signaling it's time for the battle to begin. Anticipation is high. Eyes stay locked on the open gate, waiting for a grand entrance. But there's nothing. Confusion ensues. The crowd murmurs. Has the CADBOROSAURUS's challenger gotten cold feet? Then suddenly, a bright light appears from above the Coliseum, blinding every eye as it descends onto the battleground. Broken free once again from the Iowa coal mine it's been trapped in for more than 100 years, it is the Van Meter visitor.
Yeah.
Caddy's entire body is lit up below by the beam emitting from the visitor's horned head. The visitor lets out a shriek as it swoops down towards the sea monster, fully intent on capturing its prey with its talons. But just as the visitor nears the water, Caddy's enormous head and neck emerge from the waves, slamming down on top of the pterodactyl-like creature. And she begins to circle the Van Meter visitor in the water, who's now flapping and flailing, trying to
Oh,
get
no.
airborne again.
Yeah. Oh my God.
no.
The visitor takes flight, trying to escape and leave the Coliseum for good, but Caddy lurches out of the water, snatching the visitor out of the air and pulling
No.
it down, as both the CADBOROSAURUS and the Van Meter visitor disappear into the depths of the bay.
My God.
The end.
Oh damn.
You did
Ugh.
the Van Meter visitor dirty.
Hey,
Ugh.
you don't know.
That was
You don't know.
brutal. Like
No, it ain't surviving that.
It could. You never know.
like there's me and Eli battles to where we say, oh, what if these two cryptids fought? And then there's just Jasmine who comes in and just annihilates everything. Like statistically speaking, I think Jasmine's the most bloodthirsty out of all of us.
Might be.
That was just brutal, like cruel even. My God, Jasmine, my God.
I know, for real.
I had a lot of
That was
fun.
horrible. It's
I
the trap-
re-listened to our Van Meter visitor episode to refresh my memory of what the cryptid was. That's a good episode.
Dude, that he got trapped down there, and you brought him out only to kill him, to drown him.
He didn't die. It's not confirmed that he's dead. He just went underwater, bro.
Where'd he go, Jasmine?
Open to interpretation.
Into the CADBOROSAURUS's tummy.
Yep, maybe. I'm so glad I got that out of my system.
Work some demons out, eh?
Yeah.
Well, shit. I think we all did this tome, and it's going to get even crazier in the next couple episodes.
Oh yeah.
I think that's it though, guys.
I
that
think
is
so.
it.
I think we're ready to sign off. Who are we thanking today, Eli?
Today, we are thanking our Patreon supporter, the Singular Fortean Society. That isn't just anybody out there. That is Tobias and Emily Whalen of the Singular Fortean Society. So shout out to those two doing cool research. We've had them on the show a couple of times now.
Yep.
And, check out their latest book, Tales of High Strangeness. I think it's called Volume 1. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I hear good things. So,
And if you want to read all of the articles available for information on the Cadborosaurus, you can head to our website. We're going to have a blog post up there that lists all of our sources so that you can read them firsthand. And yeah, anything else we want to remind them of before we sign off?
I think just thanks for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe if you can, and we'll see you next week for something even crazier, huh?
yep.
Sounds good. Bye.
Bye.
There you go, baby.
We want to thank you guys for listening to Cryptid Campfire. We really appreciate it, and we'd appreciate it even more if you left us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It helps us rank, and more people can find us and join the campfire. If you haven't yet, consider following us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. That's at Cryptid Campfire on all three. Be sure to check out our website, cryptidcampfire.com, where you can find campfire t-shirts and other merch, as well as our weekly blog, expanding upon what we talk about in the episodes. If you've done all that, consider subscribing to our Patreon page. $5 a month gets you access to exclusive episodes and wallpapers that haven't been released anywhere else. For the price of a coffee, you will be directly helping us make this show the best it can be. If you want to follow our hosts, you can find their personal profiles on Instagram at Jasmine May With, that's JasmineMaewith, at Alex Daikaiju, that's at AlexDaikaiju, and at the Eli Watson. Thank you, everyone, and see you next week.
This podcast is a part of Straight Up Strange Productions. Discover more shows like this one at straightupstrange.com.